Thank you all for being with us. I truly appreciate the opportunity to share stories live. It touches my heart. And some of you look like you're just perky and ready for this, but some of you look like if my voice is too low and slow, y'all gonna go to sleep. So we're gonna do something together right now to affirm this moment and one another. Look to someone to your left, to your right, in front of you or behind you, and on the count of 3, you are going to say, "You are wonderful." 1, 2, 3. Excellent. Excellent. And you can tell this is a storytelling group because you give the directions and they can't stop talking. Now that you have told someone they are wonderful, accept the compliment. Two-legged folks don't seem to accept compliments. Somebody says, "Oh, I love your shoes," and instead of just saying thank you, we'll say, "Oh, I got them on the sale table for $25. Nobody cares. You've been told that you are wonderful, so now look to someone to your left, to your right, in front of you, or behind you, and say, "Yes, that's true, and you're wonderful too." 1, 2, 3. Very good. Now we have had some wonderful days regardless of the weather. And so always remember, if you woke up in the morning, it's going to be a good day. So on the count of 3, you're going to say to someone, "Life is good." 1, 2, 3. Life is good. Excellent. Now hold up one hand, your left or your other left, doesn't matter. Wave the hand back and forth. Get your neck rolling a little bit. Touch a soul attitude. And you're going to say, "Honey," and snap, "you ain't seen nothing yet." 1, 2, 3. Honey, you ain't seen nothing yet. Give yourself some applause. I haven't told much from my father, Edward Macklin Cooper. Last graduating classes, 477th Bombardment Group, Tuskegee Airmen. And he never talked about that much. But because he was a person of color, even though he was pale-skinned, had the traditional Native American stereotypical nose, had red hair from his Scots-Irish heritage, and hazel-colored eyes, he couldn't even get a job on the radio as a weatherman because of who he was. He could not get a job as a pilot for the airlines because of who he was. But he was my hero, not because he was perfect, but because he was a good dad. I thought I'd share a couple stories with you from my father's Salagi or Cherokee heritage. And I can now tell you that I know that these are stories from that heritage because of the traditional beginning that he gave them. This is a story that my father told me when I was just a child. He said that Grandfather Mole was not invited to the council circle of animals because the other animals thought he was ugly. He was so small, and he could hardly see. And so he hid himself away, for they talked about him, and they teased him, and they were angered when they saw him. They did not know his power. One day, Grandfather Mole was resting behind a big stone. The sun was shining brightly, and it was difficult for him to see, but he could hear a young man sighing as he sat down upon that stone. And he could hear a young woman's feet moving down the path as she made her way into the forest, perhaps to gather berries, perhaps to gather herbs. And she stopped before that young man. And she said, "Hello." And the young man looked up at her and he said, and she looked at him and she walked into the forest. Now, Grandfather Mole came around the stone, sat at the feet of that young man, tried to see him and said, "Boy, what is wrong with you?" The young man said, "Oh, Grandfather Mole, I think I love her. But when I see her, my heart beats so loudly that I cannot think of anything to say. I breathe in and try to speak, and out comes that strange laughter, and she always walks away. I don't know if I will ever be able to ask for her hand in marriage because I can't even carry on a conversation with her." Grandfather Mole said, "Oh, don't worry, grandson. I have a power that can help you. Tonight, while you sleep, I will take care of this." And that night, as the young man slept in his home and the young woman slept in her home, Grandfather Mole made a tunnel between their two homes. In the darkness, he could see very well, and he came up in the home of the young woman. And he waved his little hand over her chest, and it opened with no pain. Grandfather Mole reached in and took just a piece of her heart, made his way back through that tunnel to the home of the young man, where he waved his little hand again. The young man's chest opened with no pain. And he put that piece of the young woman's heart beside the young man's. Took a piece of his heart, waved his hand and closed the chest, went back to the young woman, placed a piece of that young man's heart close to hers and closed her chest. And then he stayed in the tunnel and took a kind of rest. But he was excited to see what would happen the next morning. The young man was sitting on that stone again. Grandfather Mole was waiting behind it. The young woman came down the path with her basket, and she wasn't sure if she should bother to stop. And yet, when she saw that young man, she felt like a part of herself was missing, and that she would not find it again unless she spoke to him. And she felt like he was in her heart. And so she said again, "Hello?" And he looked up at her, and he knew her heart, and he knew that he would not be whole unless he spoke. And so he said, "Hello, may I walk with you in the woods?" And she sighed and said, "Oh, yes." And they walked into the woods together to talk with one another. And when they knew one another well, they became husband and wife. Now, word of this went around to all the two-leggeds. And when the animals heard this, they realized what Grandfather Mole could do. And they hated him even more. For he held a power that could change the world. And they told him, "Do not come to the council circle, for if we see you, we will kill you, for you could change everything." And so, sadly, to this day, Grandfather Mole still lives underground. Now, February comes along, and people think of a naked little fellow with a bow and a quiver full of arrows who shoots those arrows into people's hearts, and they speak of that as love. But in my family, we think of a small creature whom some think is ugly, who cannot see well, and we know that even the smallest, that even the one that is considered ugly, as long as that one has love, that one may have the power to change the world. And that is a story that my father told me when I was just a child. Now, he told another story, not quite as deep, I don't think, unless you think about it a little bit more, about the first days of creation when things had not quite settled into the way that they would one day be. This story blends a combination of the Salagi or Cherokee with a West African folktale that became an African-American folktale. In those days, the good Lord was walking along on what he had created, looking at this and that, seeing how things were, when he heard a strange sound in the tall grass, a kind of a fussing. And he looked down, and there was Snake. And the good Lord reached down and picked him up and said, "Child, why do you fuss?" Snake said, "There's something wrong with the way you made me. What were you thinking?" The good Lord said, "What do you mean, son?" He said, "Look at me. I ain't got no arms. I ain't got no legs. I can't see very well. I don't hear very well. So when I want to know something, I have to stick out my tongue to taste the air. And sticking out your tongue is a disgusting habit. No arms, no legs. Can't see, can't hear, and besides that, Miss Snake won't even pass the time with me. I tried to do a little courting. I thought I heard her in the grass. I slithered over, started giving her some of my best romantic lines. Took me 2 days to figure out she had slithered away, and I was talking to a stick. And then there's those other critters. They don't respect me. They just stomp on my head. They don't even look for me. I try to tell them, "Watch out, Snake," but they don't care. Well, the good Lord thought about this, and he reached up into the sky, pulled down some thunder, slapped it onto Snake's tail. Snake said, "Ow, what's this?" Good Lord said, "I just put some thunder in your tail. Now, if you think somebody's going to step on you or they're disrespecting you, you shake your tail. You say, 'Watch out, Snake,' so they'll know you're there." And he set that snake down, and the snake tried out what rattled at the tip of his tail. Snake said, "Sweet." And he slithered on in the grass to try out his new gift. Now, along came Lady Snake, and Snake shook his tail, and he grinned and said, "Watch out, Snake." Lady Snake said, "So what?" And she slithered away. Along came a rabbit, and Snake shook his tail. She said, "Watch out, Snake." And the rabbit said, bounced off his head, boing, and kept on hopping. Along came big old brother Bear. Snake shook his tail, said, "Watch out, Snake." And Bear looked down and said, "Yeah, that thing is cute." Stepped on Snake's head and just kept on walking. Well, Snake started having another hissy fit. And the good Lord heard that, came over to him, picked him up again, said, "What's wrong now?" Snake said, "This thing ain't working. Nobody's paying attention. You got to give me something else." Well, the good Lord reached up into the sky again, pulled down some lightning, set it in Snake's mouth. Cha, cha. Snake said, "Ow! What's this?" Good Lord said, "I put something in your mouth so you can protect yourself. I gave you something for protection." Snake said, "What? A speech impediment?" Good Lord said, "No, I put lightning in your teeth. Now, if somebody is going to hurt you, if they're not paying any attention to you, you still shake the thunder in your tail. You still call out, 'Watch out, Snake.' But if they get ready to stomp on you the way Bear did, you just use the lightning in your teeth. You ain't got to use it but once. And something will happen. And word will get around, and you will get a kind of respect." And he set Snake down, and Snake thought, "Sweet." And he slithered off to try his new gifts. Well, Lady Snake didn't even come over near him. Rabbit didn't even look at him. But Bear walked over and looked down at him and said, "Funny looking." Snake shook the thunder in his tail, and he called out, "Watch out, Snake." But when Bear got ready to step on his head again, Snake reached up, used the lightning in his teeth. Cha! Bear felt that. Ooh. What was that? Ooh. Bear fell down and did not get up again. Rabbit saw that, Lady Snake saw that, and word went around to all the critters that Snake had some dangerous new gifts. And Snake began to get a certain kind of respect. And Lady Snake, well, she was kind of attracted to him. And so now he had a wife, and he had a certain power and a certain kind of respect. But there are some folks who, when given a gift, misuse it. Snake was now safe, but instead of thinking of that, he went around and started biting anybody that came in his direction, just because he could. He didn't call out for them to watch. He just went up to them and bit them, and creatures were dying left and right. Well, you can't do things like that without word getting back to your daddy. And the good Lord came along and snatched up Snake again. And Snake knew what he had done. He said, "Oh, please, don't take back my gifts." And the good Lord said, "I'm not going to take anything from you. But I want to tell you what you've done. You had a certain kind of respect. It wasn't the best way to get it, but it was the thing I could think of at the time. And instead of being satisfied with that, you went out and started hurting folks for no reason whatsoever. Now, word of that is going to get to the two-leggeds. And the two-leggeds are going to fear you. And when they fear you, they will hate you. And when they hate you, they will kill you and your kind and your children from generation to generation, because you do not gain respect from causing fear or harming others." And he set down Snake to slither off into the future that he had made for himself and his kind. A future without respect. A future of being feared and hated and killed. And so it was then. And so it is now. And unless we learn from Snake, so may it ever be. And that is a story that my father told me when I was just a child. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope you enjoyed it.